Hi everyone. I wanted to do a video about the budget conversations that concluded last week. Council has approved the lowest tax increase in 23 years at 2.08%, but knowing that there were certainly a group of folks who wanted to see this even lower, as low as 0%, I thought it'd be important to do a bit of a video on what happened, why we settled where we did, and then share the impact on a couple of projects. So as mentioned, that increase at 2.08%, I think normally would be something to celebrate, because when you have the lowest tax increase in 23 years, that feels like something that should be, shouted to the world. But again, we are in tough economic times right now, and every increase, no matter how small, still has an impact on our business community. It has an impact on our seniors who are on fixed incomes, and really anyone, frankly, because it is something that you have to think about when you're doing this. Part of what created this situation really relates back to the provincial budget. Normally, the process that we went through last week shouldn't have been as exciting, maybe is the word to use, because we had previously approved our 4-year budget last year, and that was supposed to take us from 2019 through 2022 with some minor tweaks each year. But when the province released their budget, there was quite a bit of change that impacted both our operating budget and our capital budget. So on the operating side, what ended up coming back to us was we saw close to about $26 million in additional costs that got passed down to the city. I won't go into detail on each of them. You'll be able to read about that on the blog post that I've written on this item. But what that meant is that it created a situation where we were previously supposed to be at a 2.6% tax increase for 2020. If we had simply passed those costs through to the property taxpayer, that would have put us up another 1.7% to 4.3%. Council understandably was not interested in just passing through that cost, in part because of the issues I mentioned earlier. And so our administration went through and found all the necessary savings as efficiencies, as they do every year, to offset that 1.7, and then council through motions was able to reduce it another 0.52%. What I guess is a little challenging or frustrating in this discussion is that had those costs not been put onto the city through the provincial budget process, those efficiencies and savings still would have been found, because our administration does that each and every year. So we actually could have been talking about a 0.38% tax increase instead of a 2.08% increase. But to cut any further would have meant substantially reducing programs and services, closing some of our lower use rec centers, the smaller community ones, not maintaining our sports fields as often, a lot of things where you would start to notice an impact to quality of life. The other change outside of the operating was on the capital side, which funds our infrastructure. So we saw over the course of about the next 10 years, we're seeing a little over a $600 million reduction in infrastructure funding. And this is funding that we use to build roads and buildings and parks and all of these things. And that had a fairly substantial impact on our capital budget items. So a lot of items that we were hoping to build citywide had to either be cut entirely, deferred, or reduced. And I understand why it had to happen, because when you see that large of a cut, even just in the 2 years of that total amount, we saw about $180 million impact sort of as an immediate impact. And that really created the situation that we were in. So we know that the most notable impact was to the Lewis Farms Rec Center and Library, where what we're going to do is finish the existing work that we're on, and then the project was deferred so we can revisit it in about a year's time. There will be some work that comes back and a report that comes back that will be at a public council meeting where we'll have an opportunity to have people out. But for more details about how that might work going forward, I'd encourage you again to go to the blog where I break that down in a little more detail, as well as it covers off some other capital projects that were either maintained or were changed as we go forward. And The last piece is just again referencing that blog that was written. This is a pretty hefty topic and not one that I could do justice in a short video on. So over the weekend, I put forward or released a blog that covers off in detail why I chose to support the budget that we did approve, as well as covering off some of the specific impacts to projects within Ward 1 and how we might tackle in particular the Lewis Farms Recreation Center and Library, which I know is in, which should have been built many years ago, and so any further delay is just that much more challenging for neighborhoods in the West End. So while we were able to maintain and proceed with the Valley Line West LRT, which I know is also very important to a lot of folks in the West End, it's a bittersweet budget discussion because that gets to go forward and the other one was deferred. The only positive or sort of light at the end of the tunnel I'll offer is that unlike a lot of other projects which were just canceled outright, this was deferred, and that's a very different situation than what we saw in other parts of the city. So if you have some time, you might need about 10 minutes to go through it. Take some time to read through that blog, and then we'd be happy to get your feedback, your questions about the budget process and our budget deliberations, and any feedback you want to share, I'd be happy to read through. So thanks everyone for taking the time to watch this video, and have a great holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.